This is Arise America.
President Vladimir Putin has said that the sanction policy implemented by Western countries against Russia has failed. Putin said those that implemented them have themselves paid a heavy price with inflation and unemployment growth. Putin then noted substantial inflation figures in Russia, calling for the government to support the citizens.
We can now confidently say that such policy of sanctions towards Russia has failed. The economic blitzkrieg strategy didn't work. Moreover, the initiators themselves couldn't get away with the sanctions. I am talking about inflation and unemployment growth, and economic dynamics worsening in the US and the European countries. In the past month and a half alone, consumer prices in Russia have grown noticeably, by 9.4%. And yearly figures number the inflation at 17.5%. I call for attention from the government and central bank colleagues. We are all very well aware of it. Those are very high figures. People feel them on their family budgets. They can feel the prices growing. We must support our citizens, help them deal with the wave of inflation.
Well, for more on the Ukraine situation, let's cross live now to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Rise US correspondent Eric Ham. Eric, good to see you as always. Now, we've just heard the Russian president say that the sanctions imposed by the West are not working, but also Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is now calling for increased economic pressure on Russia. Does Putin have a point?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is this war is now beginning to actually take its toll, and we're beginning to see just how much it's becoming impactful, not only on Russia and Ukraine, but also across the globe. And it's not only having an impact economically, but we're told that now a Moody's report is showing that as this war continues to rage on, that inflation might begin to grow out of control. And there are concerns now that we could begin to see more recessionary measures come into play. And of course, not only is this having, again, an economic impact, but it also could be affecting the political outcomes for both President Biden as well as the rest of his party. In addition to that, what we are now seeing is that as the war continues, there's growing concern about how much the United States as well as the West will continue to be able to provide the necessary weapons that Ukraine will need, particularly now that we know that Russia has begun to step up its onslaught in the east. We've already seen a number of rocket attacks in Lviv take place while shelling continues on the capital city of Kiev. And the question now is becoming, what is the strategy of the United States and how much more will they continue to provide what is necessary for Ukraine to be able to push back the Russian military?
Now you mentioned that about Ukraine and weapons. I mean, President Zelensky of Ukraine has appealed today to Germany, basically to supply even more weapons. Is that putting Olaf Scholz in a difficult position? Because, of course, there's still the issue with their dependence on energy, particularly gas.
Yeah, and what we have seen here is a Germany that has been less hesitant, less engaged than many other Western or NATO allies. And one of the reasons for that is because, as you mentioned, Germany's reliance on Russian energy. And so what we have seen here is Germany, particularly under its new chancellor, attempting to try to maintain relations with Russia, at the same time recognizing the sovereignty of Ukraine. In addition to this is why, of course, we have seen the United States not be as forceful pushing the West, because again, every step, what we have seen is President Biden attempting to show a level of unity among Western nations against Russia, but also showcasing a level of strength to the rest of the world that the West stands united. However, as this war continues to rage, it's becoming increasingly difficult for the West to continue to provide the necessary measures to actually contain Putin without incurring some of that angst, both economically and financially as well. And now the question going forward is, how far is the West prepared to go? As we know, there have been a number of sanctions that have already been placed on Russia, but now there are many experts who believe the only place for the West to go now is to go after Russia's vaunted energy and gas, which we know amounts to about $1 billion per day. And many believe if, in fact, the West does that, that could actually shorten this war. But of course, it could mean enormous amounts of pain on European countries. Some countries that are actually dependent on as much as 80% of their energy from Russia.
And with regards to diplomatic relations amongst the West, Janet Yellen has also said today that she will not participate in G20 sessions anymore if Russia is still involved. Do you think that could be the start of a coordinated potential boycott of G20 until Russia is expelled or suspended from it?
There have actually been a number of countries, G20 countries, that have called for Russia to be removed from the G20. Even if that happens, it's still very much symbolic and doesn't necessarily change the trajectory of the war. However, what we are also hearing is that when is the United States going to actually send representatives to Ukraine? Right now, we know that some nations have already begun to send back their diplomatic presence to the city of Kiev, but the United States diplomats are still operating out of Poland. And so there are growing calls as to when the United States is going to actually put a presence on the ground, or if, in fact, the president, the vice president, or some other high-level official is going to actually go to Ukraine itself. Right now, the White House has not responded to this, but what we know is that the United States at this point is unwilling to actually take on such a risk. And of course, that would often be led by the State Department, which we're told is seen as very much risk averse and doesn't want the headlines of any U.S. diplomats attacked or killed as a result of this war.
Well, Eric, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your analysis this evening. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent in Washington, D.C.
This is Arise America.